find somebody who got their commercial real estate.
All right, welcome to tonight's study session at 6:30. Shall we get started?
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
That time started at 7:30.
Yeah,
Oh,
talk fast.
it's a very important hockey happening later apparently.
Oh, it's 7:30?
Yes.
Oh, that's good to know.
We will move through our presentation.
Yes.
Should I take it?
Sure, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I did hear from Member Dulovish, who was indicated he was unable to be here this evening. So it sounds like everybody who planned on attending is here. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the non-legislative ULUC code amendments this evening. The agenda, we're going to talk a little bit more about shopping center and campus signage and the plan there. We heard at the joint session that master sign plan may not be the best name, so we were trying to more aptly describe what we're doing in the ordinance. So this is the name we're proposing currently, is shopping center and campus signage plan. We'll also talk about plating and then notice of mailing. Shopping center and campus signage plan. As I mentioned, this was discussed under the header of master sign plan by the Planning Commission on February 24th, and then a joint City Council Planning Commission on March 11th. The intent is to create a process that fits and enhances the current code and increase the focus on integrity integration with current code following what we heard from the February 24th meeting. And I think what you'll hear is something that closely mimics current code. So the ULUC, as I previously have gone over, has two references to master sign plan. So this is something that was originally contemplated in that first ULUC draft. However, due to timing or other challenges, it was not included. The language was not included and was marked as reserved. So those reserved sections are in the CM, so the CMU section, and the BI. So that's where our business center and industrial park zonings are. And I feel that we are going to be pretty similar to that. I'll get to that in the next slide in those same basic locations. Proposed process is proposed to be administrative with maximum signage parameters. So the maximum signage parameters would be something that would be held to, allowing for that more administrative process. Shopping center and campus signage plan draft strategy. So we talked about this last time. The purpose, consistent with the city's design standards, adhere to development's design guidelines if applicable, promote economic development, contribute positively to the built environment, align with zoning and land use regulations, balance aesthetic consistency, and ensure regulatory compliance and functionality. So applicability. At the last meeting, we were definitely trying to contemplate the right sizing of this ordinance. And we had discussed the possibility of a 1 acre minimum because we were thinking of the smaller shopping centers. We heard loud and clear that this should be a process for much larger areas. And so we are now proposing a 10 acre minimum site, and then only in 3 zone districts. So the corridor mix, business center, and industrial park. And then I have an and there for some random reason. So forgive me there. So those 3 zone districts, mostly because those 3 are on larger areas, larger properties that this would be more applicable to. Attached signs, so this is wall signs among others. Some of the concept that we're working on with this master sign plan is if you are applying for it, then you're probably a shopping center or some form of campus that we feel would be more applicable to follow the sign code that's already premised in CM. So it's in the CMU part of the code, table 10.3.5.1.2, and the CM standards on top of that. So even if you're in a BC or an IP, we felt that the CM standards were the most applicable for these styles of development. One of the attached signage, so the wall sign, a lot of what we're working on, we're proposing to allow for some signage alterations when sites are abutting commercial corridors and, commercial corridor and suburban connectors. So here I've got this page from the TMP, the Transportation Mobility Plan, or Master Plan, And so it'd be the red lines and the blue lines on this plan. Now, I understand that this plan, over time, will see some amendments, et cetera. So therefore, I've also called out the streets that are applicable in this plan currently. So trying to make sure that we're consistent into the future. The proposal is that if you front onto that because of the width of the street, et cetera, that you may be able to have a little larger sign as a minimum, right? We would still use the formula of X square feet of a minimum, or 1 square foot of signage area for each 1.5 linear feet of facade with occupied by an individual business, whichever is greatest. So this would just change that minimum from 32 to 40 if you were in one of these master sign plan areas. The other part that I've been working on as well is the potential for locations, it's not on the slide, but locations that are over 200 feet away from one of these two types of road designations, and over 100,000 square feet to be able to have larger wall signs. So you're set back a little further. The main issue right now with our code when it comes to those buildings and the wall sign size is that there's a maximum cap on it. So this would be changing that maximum cap, increasing it. Because they oftentimes have the length for the calculation, but we've capped it at 200 square feet. Moving on to freestanding signs. So this would basically allow for freestanding signs. The draft ordinance would allow for freestanding multi-parcel shopping center signs. That's kind of the gap in the code right now, where we do not allow for kind of that subdivision signage. The proposed maximum size would be tied to the table that already exists, right? So it would be for either a monument or a pylon sign, be able to choose. And the only exception to this table is that we would be proposing that if you do a pylon or a monument sign, that you are not required to abide by, there's a little section there that talks about abiding by the height that is no taller than the highest point of the building. So instead going to that overall height, maximum height, in this case, the pylon is already 25 feet and the monument is 15. So that's the recommendation there, is just to remove that portion for the master sign plan, but keeping the rest of it in there in the sign code. And then electronic messenger signs prohibited except for potentially gas station price is the recommendation there too. To continue on to the next slide. So if you choose to do the master sign plan and you have these joint signs, these joint multi-parcel signs, then the master sign the shopping center and campus signage plan would restrict the other parcels in that development to only have a monument sign. So it would remove the possibility of a pylon or pole sign, and that would still be tied to those CM standards. So not trying to create any new standards, just saying if you have a larger sign for the shopping center as a whole. Everybody else would only be able to have that monument signage. And the same with the electronic messenger board, prohibited with the exception potentially of, similar to the example of, the digital gas readouts. Also talking about some exemptions. Initially, we talked about the possibility of putting some exempt signage in the new section that was created. Instead, we're actually looking to add on to the current exempt signage, and that would be for building wayfinding signs. And so it would allow for, explicitly allow for entrance signs. So if you have an entrance sign or an exit sign above a door, that's not a wall sign, right? That's an exempt sign. And then service entrance signs for commercial buildings over 100,000 square feet with a maximum of 32 square feet. This example is probably too large, to be honest. That's probably over 32 square feet, but I kind of wanted to give you an idea of what what I would be terming in the code a service entrance sign. And then drive-through signs, we currently don't have a great description of a drive-through sign, so it's something that staff often struggles with. So are proposing one primary and one secondary drive-through sign allowed per drive-through lane. And then electronic displays allowed. Oftentimes now you pull up to a newer fast food restaurant and it will be electronic. And so we're just trying to comply with the times there. And with that, that is my presentation on the signage portion of this. I'm more than happy to either have the discussion now on that portion or go through the entire presentation on the other items and couple it together.
The service entrance sign, where did the 100,000 square feet come from as far as building size?
Yeah, we looked at a few of our larger buildings in the city, and it seems like a lot of the larger users are, in that 120, 160,000 square foot. That is definitely something that I'd be happy to have a recommendation on one way or another if you'd like it to be changed, but it was more drawing a square over a building and kind of seeing what size it was.
I mean, I don't have anything right now off the top of my head, but my concern was like grocery stores, a lot of those are that 50, 60,000 foot kind of thing. I just want to make sure that those, I don't want to say do it at 50, but maybe a little bit more on that kind of mid-size anchor tenants in those shopping centers, as opposed to, the Home Depot, that's 110,000 feet or whatever it is.
Yeah, and like I said, more than happy to take the input. If that's kind of consensus, more than happy to make that change.
Any questions or comments?
I do think we should discuss all the sign stuff and then sort of do the signs while we just had it and then go to the next topic. Can we go back to one of the earlier slides? In general, could you number slides and presentations? It would really help for referencing them.
Okay.
I'm often struggling to know what to tell you to flip back to. Back earlier.
What was the content in regards to?
It was, I think, the one just before this. There we go. So here, the wall signs, I want to just draw some attention as on the illumination section, the table at the bottom. Illumination, we specify what's allowed in that line. External, downlighting. Internal, which is like a plastic, light from inside of like a plastic case. Halo is different from downlighting.
Yeah, so it's your sign face,
yes,
and
the
then
light
it's
behind
kind of
the light.
backlit, right?
And
Yeah.
This notes the only 3 allowed types on these kind of signs.
Yes.
So these are the only 3 types of lighting allowed on the signs.
Yeah, I had heard from Plan Commission at the study session that lighting was definitely a topic of interest, and so wasn't proposing to really. I looked back at the code and wasn't really proposing to change the.
This is the code. This is similar in code to the non-shopping center and sign
This is a current section of the code.
That's for all
That's,
signs.
that's from our current section of wall signage, from the CMU, standards, yes. And the same with the next table is actually a clip of the CMU standards for freestanding signs.
So we're just basically taking that over to the campus, shopping center and campus structure.
Yeah, with a couple minor, proposed exceptions or alterations.
To Drew's question of where do we trigger the campus constraints, whether it's 100,000 square feet, I don't know. I mean, we could say stores are 50,000 square feet and super big boxes are 120, and we could split the difference at 80. I don't know how that would affect who's doing it. So I'm kind of agnostic on that question. I'm fine with having it trigger at 70 or 80 or 50, if that makes sense. If we think some of these IP and CM parcels will be anchor tenanted by somewhat smaller stores, like a Five Below that's just really big or something.
You could do a little more research on that as well for the.
If it wasn't triggered to have to use the shopping center and campus signage plan, they would just go to the city's normal. And so they could have one pylon or one on the whole.
Oh, for freestanding signs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for freestanding signs, right now there's nothing that would allow for multi-parcel signage. But if you had a singular site, whether it's within a shopping center or, one of the existing sites that we already have, then the code doesn't necessarily indicate that you're restricted to one of those types. So there's pole, pylon, and monument, right? And they all have those requirements. As I mentioned, I know it's a little tough to see, but I did want to include the table in its entirety to kind of show what is there currently in the CM zone districts.
There's the Del Taco in Bellevue. It's near Bellevue and Broadway. There's a car wash right in front of it. Has a 20-foot high illuminated, multi-pixel sign. It's probably not 10 years old. I wonder how these people are getting signs in and they're just putting it in without approval.
Well, the Del Taco is actually not in.
That's Inglewood,
in the city,
right?
Yeah, so I actually have a good answer for you on that.
So ugly.
The big jewelry store signage across the street from that.
Oh yes, that one.
8 signs in a quarter mile right there.
It's hideous. Woodlawn Center used to be a single. It would definitely qualify as a 100,000 square foot CM parcel. It would be like you'd have to do MDP probably for it today if you were to bring it forward. Let's say a redevelopment plan was brought forward to redo Woodlawn. Sometimes they sell the pad retail as a section out of it. So what do we do when somebody has a master sign plan and then they sell, like Starbucks is basically, that Starbucks there was sold off as they carved out the parcel and Starbucks now owns it. They could then say, we're not part of the master plan, we're not part of the CM parcel, we're our own little thing, we got our own sign rules. Is that how that works? Is they could, if they sell off, let's say the drive-throughs along Santa Fe that are presently, and those all just become separately owned parcels, do they get to
Yeah,
be
so.
exempted from the campus signage plan that was developed for the whole thing?
No, this is intended to also be able to be utilized by existing shopping centers, right, that meet the criteria. And so it would be a matter of having authorization from the group as a whole to move forward with it, right? And we've talked a little bit about exactly what that looks like, but the intent is that if you sign on to the master sign plan as a collective, that you're abiding by that. And of course, there's a lot of signage in there that you still have high flexibility on. Your wall signs, there's a number of other attached signs that we're not really proposing to touch even. That you would just go to you would go to the CM zone district and abide by those standards. So, yeah.
Even with that, just similar to, some type of PD, if any portion of that property was transferred or assigned to someone else, whoever comes in would still be subject to the underlying master sign plan. So, we're not intending for these plans to be recorded in any way, but how we're crafting it, we're still working on the administrative aspect of it, but how we're crafting it is that the legal description would include that entire parcel. And so if someone does move in, that legal description is still included, even though maybe belongs to another owner, they would still be subject to whatever the underlying conditions or restrictions we have.
I wasn't sure if that was in the code, that if there's like making that clear in the code so that
I don't
future
know.
tenants or shifting parcel ownerships, that they understand that they're bound by future sign plan. That would be something to just be clear about for people, because these things they change hands, and people will possibly think that they have a different idea of what they can do and not do. All right, that was it.
Also, just a note too, you mentioned Woodlawn. Woodlawn is 8.5 acres, and
Yeah,
that's
too
if you compiled all the parcels, yeah. So I think that was one of the examples we used last time, that, you know, it's, yeah.
Things were smaller in 1957. The big parceling didn't start happening until.
It also looks like it's on a mixed use downtown Main Street and not a suburban connector or commercial.
Littleton
Yes.
Boulevard isn't technically one.
That's correct as well.
So we want to limit it to these streets by name and not just be based on size of campuses.
I,
Do we want that? Because we never know how these might be brought forward in the future.
yeah, I was trying to follow up on our last discussion
I wonder
and.
about that. We should think about that. Do we really want to name specific roads and then everybody else? Should somebody cobble together 15 parcels on Littleton Boulevard and do a replat onto a giant campus, they would be, well, we're not bound by your signage and campus rules, even though, so if it's size, that's really kind of the thing that triggers the idea of a campus, or maybe it shouldn't be limited to particular roadways and just should apply to things of a certain scale. I mean, and does this apply on Federal to the future site, say, of, Columbine Square? That's a huge.
Under this proposal, it would apply to Federal and to Bellevue.
I mean, it's not, I think 95% of all future parcels will be on these corridors, but we never know. I don't know, it's just something I'll throw out there. Feel free to comment on it.
Could be that, that's something that we look at is with the planning effort for the corridor, the boulevard.
Whether that should be included in this kind of thing.
Yeah, or if there's some special signage consideration that would,
Downtown has its own signage standards that are quite a bit different, so yeah, that could be a potential for Littleton Boulevard.
I guess I'm thinking that I kind of generally support the direction this is going. I like the idea that it's tied back to existing sign code that we have, because I think the sign code we have is pretty good. I guess there's a few things that feel a little bit arbitrary. I guess that 100,000 square foot number, maybe the 10 acre, I think it's like the 10 acre, but it could be more of a sliding scale once you get up to what would be considered a campus. The other question I had was on the prohibition of electronic signs altogether, except for gas station signs, right? And I think about that one that's at Broadridge, which is functional in the way, I mean, it has size limitations. I think it's done fairly well. It's not a bad sign. It's not like the ones we were talking about at Broadway and Bellevue. But they were able to get efficiently and probably affordably a number of different tenants in there advertised right on Broadway without having a huge sign that lists all of them, right? They can switch it up a bit. So maybe there's an exception there for with restrictions with some sort of electronic sign beyond just the gas station signs and the drive-through signs.
I did have a thought on, the arbitrary acreage. Could we tie it somehow to, like, the coverage ratio on the parcels?
The coverage ratio on the parcels.
Cause you could have a 10-acre site, but 3 buildings of 5,000, I mean, not that anybody would do that, but 10-acre site, 3 buildings, 5,000 feet apiece. Or you could have whatever the max coverage ratio is in that particular zone district. Those are two very separate, very different developments, rather than just doing it on land size, looking back at the proposal, seeing what.
Just trying to think of administration on that, so.
Cause it'd have to be tied to, it would have to be a hard percentage.
Yeah, so most of our,
But then that scales as well with the size of your development. Whatever the parcel size is.
yeah, so like, BC and IP have a coverage of like 0.15, so like 15%, 24% already built in. So I mean, we could just tie it to the zone districts. Yeah, sorry, maybe I'm not quite understanding exactly the,
Well, I'm saying that
proposal,
rather
sorry.
than say, the parcel is 10 acres, therefore you must comply with this code.
it'd be optional to apply for it, but yeah. Okay.
So say it's 10 acres, I wanna, that triggers that you're available to do it, as opposed to 9.9 acres, but you've got max coverage ratio on it. Versus a 10-acre space where you've got half the max coverage ratio on it. It kind of, what my thought is, rather than this piece of land is this size, therefore you're allowed to do it, and if you're at 9.5 or 1 point below whatever the final number is, that's not available to you, even though you're at max coverage ratio and you've got, it's this type of building and all that other stuff, and I know it's hard to do that administratively, but I'm just throwing that thought out there as a solution.
Yeah, and I'm all for hearing, taking ideas, et cetera. I'm just trying to figure out how I would write that. Let me think on that a little bit. So,
That's the follow-up I had too, is why would you do this? Why would a developer do this instead of parcel it out into 15 parcels and put with 5 parcels on the frontage and get 5 signs and put 3 tenants in each sign?
so the intent is that, that this would apply for not only those bigger singular parcels, but yeah, a location that did parcel things out, right? So you've got, I'm gonna take the freestanding signs or the standalone signs because I think that's a little easier to talk about. So one of the things I guess I glanced over that I meant not to, is that, location of those multi-parcel freestanding signs is proposed to be at either entrances into the subdivision or the intersection of 2 streets with the classification mentioned earlier in the TMP. And then no 2 freestanding multi-parcel signs or campus signs shall be located within 800 feet of each other. So offering a pretty broad, but then that wouldn't limit the individual parcels from having a monument sign, right? So you'd have your kind of subdivision sign and then you'd have your smaller monument sign for those other parcels. That being said, what is being proposed is that they would have to be monument signs rather than pole or pylon to try to make them a little more uniform across, trying to work on that aesthetic. So
So the incentive is you can have a bigger sign.
you can have that joint sign, yeah.
Cause that's what I was saying is if you have 4 parcels on the frontage without having to comply with what, the extra stuff, you just put 3 tenants, 3 tenants, 3 tenants, 3 tenants of whatever's behind it. But having that larger sign, I kinda understand the intent.
Yeah, and right now the code doesn't allow you to have basically off-site signage on a parcel. And that's kind of where the subdivisions, we already have some of them, right? You look on Broadway, there's a subdivision signage. That our new code, I think it was a bit of a gap in there. And this would allow for that subdivision signage for somebody who is not, on one of the out parcels that directly fronts the street. That's kind of the intent of it there. Yeah.
Cause right now as it's written, Jim's, shoes is on this parcel and Bob's clothes is on a different one. You can't, this parcel is only allowed to have a Jim Shoes sign. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct. So it does allow for, I say this, and this is where the nuance is, right? If you are a multi-tenant building, so you're a 4-unit building, currently you are allowed to have all 4 of those tenants on your monument sign.
But if it's 2 parcels, 2 tenants each, you can only have.
Got it. Exactly. So anybody who's set back behind would not have signage.
Doesn't get a sign.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's gonna be a larger wall sign, it looks like.
Sorry,
You get a larger wall sign potentially for the tenants within the shopping center as well.
that's also something that we talk about a little bit on this slide, and then something else that I'm wrapping up language on as well.
Just had a question about the electronic message center. This is probably for legal, just, it specifies just for gas station price displays and, do we start running into, the content of the signage? Or is that, fully, Reed versus Gilbert compliant?
I'd have to look into that. Actually, that's the first I've heard of that argument.
No, I think that's a good point. We can add language that would get us to a point. So
Yeah,
thank you for calling
Yeah.
that
There's
out.
lots of different ways to get there,
Yeah.
just wanting
Yeah.
to flag that. I know we did a Reed v. Gilbert thing years ago to get rid of things like if you had a cannabis facility, you weren't allowed to use a cannabis leaf to advertise. Well, that was content-based and disallowed under Reed v. Gilbert.
No, I appreciate you catching that. Thank you.
Any other sign observations?
Well, I just think about, we keep studying this, I feel like the last presentation had, gave us a sense of scale of, 1 square foot per 150, and we just had, like, this example is 20 linear feet, and here's what you get. Like, just having an exhibit that demonstrates what it is we're doing, this is very difficult, it's a very visual topic, and we have no visuals. It's like, it's just very abstract, so whether it's, you get the other type of signage, whether it's 100,000, like what's 100,000 square feet look like? It's hard to do that in your head without having some context, so I just feel like we're lacking some visuals to make a judgment on these things right now. I was also wondering if, I kind of felt like the last conversation was leading us away from poles, posts, and pylons. Am I remembering that wrong, or?
I thought there was some pushback from council on that we shouldn't be limiting. That was what I heard in the joint council, is it?
I think in our last conversation, correct me if your memories are different than mine, is that having all 3 was kind of problematic, and that pole signs were something that wasn't wasn't seen to be as advantageous in the setting of Littleton. And that's one of the reasons why we're proposing to, if you're just a single parcel, that you still abide by the sign code, but then for aesthetics and trying to do continuity, restricting 2 monument signs if you do the taller pylon sign. So, because the pylon sign, a pole sign, I think is challenging to get a lot of multi-tenant signage on, right? Inherently, it's kind of a little bit more of that lollipop with the sign up high. Whereas the pylon, I think, allows for a little bit more of that vertical component to have different tenants in. So that was the proposal.
It was like
council was sort of split. Pam Grove was in favor of restrictive. Rob Reichert was not really, he didn't like monument signs. There wasn't really a clear council position on it. And it sounds to me like we're allowing the individuals, the people not in the campus plans, to still do any one of the three types that they want to do. So we're gonna have a whole bunch of Chick-fil-A's with signs. It's just whether the campuses, we could say, oh, you can't do pylons and poles, but then we still have strips of, what we really need to begin to reach into is the overall signage structures that apply to every parcel, not just the campuses. So the pylons with multi-tenants that are very large, because these are giant campuses, a hospital or something, that's kind of the compromise is no pole, but a big pylon, and then everything else monuments. It's sort of a middle step between the two. You've got a big sign that's highway, freeway sized, basically, and then a lot of lower scale signs, hopefully. We'll see how, I don't know, what's the maximum height on the monuments in this plan?
It's per our current code, which is 15.
Yeah, those are pretty tall monuments. It's at the wall level up there. These are not, they're
15 is still pretty good size.
That's pretty good size. I mean, it's that line up there on the wall. These are massively, these are potentially huge signs.
In the community I've worked for previously, it was 6 foot. Was monument
When I think of
signs,
monuments,
so
I think
that
of them
were
as
single tenant.
head scale, and 15 seems pretty big to me. You're back into the roadway signage level. Maybe that's something to consider as 10.
More than happy to hear out recommendations on that. I'm not tied to 15. I was trying to work within what language that.
Does the existing code allow a 15-foot monument sign for like a single parcel business? This is one of these things, I feel like we roll out the code and we see what happens. I'm not sure a lot of businesses want a 15-foot monument. That's kind of garish and awful. People might say, what are they doing? It's blocking the whole store, whatever. So I don't know if it's a break point, but in general, I'm all for like not regulating too much, just let people do what they want. But and to Craig's point about the flashing sign, I am still a big opponent of reading signs that move, especially because they're aimed at people driving, it's a distraction. And that we should, gas station prices, okay, fine, that's like, communities have all agreed that gas stations have to constantly update their signs, so they need electronic, movable type on the thing. But I don't think we should be allowing campuses to have, they're just, once you start allowing moving digital presentation signs, people will find ways to get in there with bright pinks and yellows and whatever. It won't be as nice and red, and I'm not a big fan of opening that can of worms, Craig. But I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I like the way it was written there, just gas stations.
I agree with that, but as far as like flashing and moving and stuff, I'm thinking like more of the
Stable.
changing over time, like maybe there's a minimum time that they could be on the same message, but it was really more about like allowing them to advertise more businesses within a center that could fit on a big old sign.
I have worked in a community that we wrote the sign code to indicate 5 seconds of static sign. And then it could change to 5 seconds of static sign again. So it wasn't, the fireworks going off. Like that. That's not what we wanted either.
El Tago is like watching anime. Like, seriously, animated crazy.
Technically,
but-
not allowed by Englewood sign.
What's code enforcement like over there?
The other advantage of the electronic signs is it really helps the property owners and landlords out, because those inserts, those are not cheap, I think. What was the last one we did on South Park? I think it was like $250 just for the slide in. And then that also helps with having the old tenants on there and the things all yellowed out and all those add-on effects, I think.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily have to update every 5 seconds either, right? That's, what you're talking about is you're just listing your clients in an electronic format rather than doing it via slide-in back illuminated sign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can do it that way, or you can have the minimum static speed, time, anything like that. I mean, I'm all for electronic signs. My concern is, I just know there's one on my way home that's on Broadway and I-25 that the lumens are jacked to like 1,000 and it's just bright white and just,
Once you allow electronic digital displays,
that's the
you
issue.
open a door to a lot of possible rejiggering with
There-
them.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a lot that you have to get into and kind of wade into in terms of, well, how long can it be static? What's your maximum brightness? You know, could you transition from a dark, you know, a black and purple sign to a bright white and yellow sign? Is that gonna mess with people, right? Is it, are you scrolling from one sign to the next? It just gets too messy, and I don't know that I would, I think we can keep things a lot simpler by just, yeah, limiting it to the gas prices. I'm trying to think if there's something else, like from a static price perspective that would apply, and rather than just gas, right? Like if there's another, I can't think of anything offhand though. Like I can't think of anything offhand that would have that same kind of,
Yeah, prices have changed.
that would have that same kind of, you know, static price that, you know, people wanna know, is there passing by, you know, that would also apply, but that's, again, that's the only case where I could think where you would want that electronic sign is to display that price that only moves on like a day-to-day basis, you know, and then obviously, you know, I don't know if there's, I don't know if there's standards associated with how those prices are displayed, right? You know, I mean, I feel like we see it pretty common. It's red if it's regular, it's green if it's diesel, and nobody really kind of goes outside the bounds of those because it's whatever we're all conditioned to expect. But yeah, I'd support just keeping it as just the gas prices. Unless somebody can make an argument for something else that would have to display a price like a gas station. But I can't think of anything though that would apply to.
Bananas.
So, you know, well, I don't know if it's one of those things where like at some point in the future, you'd be looking at like superchargers that are like, you know, oh, 15 cents per kilowatt,
Convention we
right?
inherited from the 70s and 80s, people very focused on pricing. But in 25 years, price of gasoline, the signs, digital charging or charging for electric cars may make this obsolete anyway. I wonder if we're gonna even be worried about this in 2070.
Well, but are you gonna have charging stations that are like, you know, this station 15 cents per
Maybe.
kilowatt, right, you know?
Well, I've
little
seen that
implanted-
at places where they do have,
The electric rates.
yeah, they'll have the rate per kilowatt hour.
I just think we have, right now, is a convention of gas
Yeah.
station price, that's really is the one, and I would say minimally intervene on that, allow that.
Yeah.
I realized I did go back one slide from this. External, the illumination, external downlighting, internal halo. Do we not allow neon? I mean, neon is one of those things that I would say we would want to allow. It can be beautiful, it's become part of, as I think of the redevelopment of Little Uptown, downtown and uptown, these areas maybe that, I mean, I saw in I think I showed you the Denver one, they do allow neon. I mean, neon is like an artistic form of signage.
Would be considered internal.
So
They make external
Often.
signs with them.
oftentimes the codes that I've seen are more the like exempt signs are open, you know, and that could be neon or something inside, you know, similar to what Commissioner Cornell mentioned, is, you know, behind the pane of glass and it's neon and because it's internal. They do make external neon, a lot of communities don't allow them, but
There was a period where they were outlawed. After the Ford, people got sick of them. They were like highway signs. There became a big movement to ban, you know, they were a sign of seedy back alley bars and too much drinking. And so they just banned them all across the country, a big wave. And neon went out of fashion. But they've now come back as a kind of beautiful form of lighting. They're so much low intensity, much lower intensity. They have fake neon now, which is these weird tubes that look like bioluminescent tubes that are like pseudo fake. But real neon, I actually appreciate. I don't know if we want to get into that, but if we're really only allowing these three, and those, some of the internal light signs, I think that most of those look terrible. I think a neon sign would be preferable to some of those ugly white plastic signs that we see. So, it's hard when you try and start regulating all these things. I'd like to be permissive about quality materials and quality signs. When I think of the digital signs that change your tenant's name every 5 seconds, the reason we do that is cheap. You can program it to just type in and change. But in a world where you didn't allow those kind of signs, somebody would come up with a banner and it would roll vinyl, cheap vinyl, and just had the sign slide. When you disallow something, people find a new way of making a moving sign that isn't lit with a digital sign. We encourage that kind of innovation by banning bad forms, like pixel lighted signs that do it. But we don't get there until those are banned. Sort of in the inverse is we knocking neon signs out. We might be, let's imagine Littleton Brewing Company. They couldn't do a nice neon logoized version of their sign, but they might want to in a black circle of metal that blocks light. I can imagine a lot of beautiful signage that way, and I think we should permit it.
There's a small, I'm trying to do a quick search on neon, right? There's some allowance in 2 sections of downtown, and that's all that I was able
Because
to
they're
find.
historic form of signage.
So, just
How do people feel about throwing neon? Real neon, I would have to say, actual gas.
I mean, why do that when it's so much less energy efficient than the LED neon that you can get?
Well, there's that energy.
Actually, on the building code side, I think there's a lot about energy efficiency.
How bad is the energy use of a neon sign? Atrocious.
Yeah, I don't know that you're gonna see it for like a campus either, right? Like that does feel like an independent business. So I mean, I guess, yeah, I don't know if that's a,
Advent Hospital in orange neon.
Are you starting a neon company?
cursive, no, yeah, no,
But I'm a big Jack Kerouac fan, and there's a lot of neon bar signs in his writing. And it makes me
it's not it's not a bad, if there was something, I don't know if you could phrase it to say, signs in keeping with the historic character, with the historic, or with the build timeline of the neighborhood or something, right? So like Woodlawn, which was built in, the 50s, could use 50s or, or businesses there could petition for, I don't know.
That they wouldn't qualify for this section of code.
Yeah,
No,
I was
but
gonna
we're
say, I'm
saying,
not sure we're in the
yeah,
right
that's true,
direction right now.
yeah, that's fair, I'm getting a little off topic because we were talking about shopping center. But you did say that this was referring back to the current sign plan, so I don't know if that's something for, sort of not campus, not shopping center campus signage, but for, just general sign plan that, signs that aren't just, internal downlighting or halo, designs, can be approved with, if they're in keeping with, the construction or aesthetic or something, right, of the building. Just to give people that, just to say that, yeah, there's an option, right? Maybe that's not automatic, right? But it's also saying like, if it comes back to it,
Put a
like,
footnote on that, at the discretion of the community development director, people could ask for a different kind of sign, and you guys would have to evaluate whether that was basically conform to the ideas that drive all of our signage rules, but maybe aren't an external downlight, internal or halo, and that could be a neon sign, that could be wrought iron with some other, I don't know, just allow you some flexibility if somebody really had a specific idea. I think for the campus stuff, it's not liable to come up. I think of
Right.
Littleton Adventist, and they already have campus signs, and that's the kind of stuff you're mostly gonna see. And I did like Denver's sign guidelines because they did specify what was allowed, and there were some really nice types of signs in there. And they don't allow internal.
Not for downtown, yeah.
They disallow that, because it's kind of cheesy and ugly.
like Andrew pointed out, yeah, there's definitely ones where like, depending on if somebody gets a low quality plastic insert, like it starts to look really, like it'll yellow and it looks dodgy, So.
Do we have a light emission maximum?
There is a section in the code outside of signage, it actually references outdoor illumination in the code.
Overall parcel, but not the signs themselves.
No, I believe it's actually
Individual
for
sign
signage.
premises is constrained, okay.
You see, and that's another reason why, I didn't really get into that because there was already, restrictions for it.
Okay, so we just take those right over to these, okay. Sounds
Going back to the campus plan, I notice in the definitions, we don't define campus, so maybe that's a place to put that 10-acre minimum, maybe add the campus definition. I didn't see it.
We could do that. The only downfall is it wouldn't apply, or, we would have to apply it to shopping center also. We'd have to have a definition of shopping center, I think, as well, which is, we can look at both of those.
The shopping center, by definition, could be any size, right?
Yeah. Power center, regional, strip center, lifestyle.
Yeah, so, and that's one of the reasons why, and you don't have the full language, but we did put in parentheses behind campus 2 examples. It was hospital and college university. So trying to better articulate what that is without putting a true definition.
What about South Park as a campus? Would that whole area be considered a campus?
So we've reached out to South Park in regards to some feedback. I need to do it again on the more updated version. But they are a large subdivision, and they do have subdivision style signage throughout. They have things that say South Park that are not, tied to businesses at all. So yeah.
We have one signs at their various corner intersections, one in Broadway. Yeah, I wonder if shopping center and campus signage is maybe, I see what you're trying to do, but maybe we should just say large acreage
I don't know.
signage. What?
I don't love the name either, I know it's a reaction to
It's
the
like-
master
It's
sign.
like, that's a good, it's South
Well,
Park, it's neither, really, it's not a campus, it doesn't operate like a campus, and it is not a shopping center. Yet, if it were to come today, whether as a PD or, it would need to conform to this. I would want it to have campus signage applied to it, or it should at least be an option for them. So if there is an acreage trigger for this, to me, it's less important how much the coverage is. If somebody has a park, something this size, and wants to sign the whole dang thing for the future, for whatever their plans are, maybe it's just a large acreage signage plans, or 10-acre plus signage master plan. Whatever it is that actually triggers it, instead of the content of the businesses or the
And currently
Large location, large sign.
currently the way the draft is written, it says multi-parcel sites and campus, and after campus is where we kind of give the examples of hospitals and colleges. So we do kind of broaden it with multi-parcel sites that are at least a minimum of 10 acres. But we can take a look at that language. I think
it
that
should just be,
should cover it, but
you don't want to try like 10-acre plus signage plans.
We have acreage residential,
We do have
acreage commercial, or
large commercial.
We
Oh, but
could call it large site or large, location signage plan. I'm not tied to the name, I'll be completely honest there. We come up with, I'm happy to go back to
Campus
master
doesn't bother
sign
me
plan.
so
and-
much, because what we're talking
Okay,
about
more.
is just the idea of applying a campus-like idea to the signage. So that's more descriptive of the type of signage system we're gonna use. But in setting it up, it might be large area campus signage plan.
We'll call it the jumbo multi-parcel site plan, site sign plan.
Well, one thing we
More
know, it doesn't
descriptors.
apply to things that are less than 10 acres. No matter how, they might have a campus in a 4-acre site. They might call it a campus, but it would not qualify for this because
None
it's
of
too
it is
small.
proposed.
It is really, the trigger is the size. And that should be maybe indicated in the name of this part of the code. that size is the determinant, and not the form or the type of business, not the mental framing of the owners. And maybe the acreage should be less than 10. I think Woodlawn, it qualifies as a campus, it should be. But anyway, that's what I mean, it should be triggered by size, not streets, triggered by size, not whether you have 14 buildings and they're all shopping or not shopping. It should be a size, but 8, 10, I have no sense of scale on that.
Yeah, and I
don't
do
want
have,
staff to get into it. I think this works for most of the people wanting it. That's the way to go.
so just for a sense of scale, I did go through and tried to measure. Oh, that's no fun. I was hoping that you would see my screen. Well, I navigated away from the PowerPoint, so, and I guess it won't let me share that. Okay, anyway, I did take kind of a view as to what was over 10 acres, what was under, and it's probably something better that I put in the presentation for next time since I can't project it. But yeah, there's a number of sites on Bellevue that would be over 10 acres, not all, but a number of them. There are a number of sites on Broadway, but they're further south. The ones to the north are typically smaller depending on how you cobble together parcels. You know, we do have a couple campuses in town that would certainly meet the 10 acres. You know, the Aspen Grove of the world is over 10 acres. And a few parcels on Mineral and Santa Fe as well. So,
I could see some of the larger Broadway car dealerships being sold as a pair and becoming a fairly large campus. What about Littleton High School and Epic's campus across the street? Actually is a campus.
what are the size there?
I don't know. But
Yeah.
I'm just thinking they would probably, ultimately, that may want to be branded with their own signs. ACC might be 10 acres, but it's on, again, it's not on one of the listed streets. Santa Fe, yeah, that's true. On that
I mean,
edge.
technically, it's not on Santa Fe.
True, it's in front of Vinewood, or whatever that street is called.
it's that little 1.5
Yeah, I mean, Littleton High School,
Technicals here.
I know it says that you block, you gotta,
Jared saw that, that's 200 feet off.
Littleton High School is 20 acres.
Yeah.
So Epic would be quite a bit smaller though.
No, it's not. It's on Littleton Boulevard, yeah. Dang.
And if I recall, from
Sunset.
the controversy over the heritage ball field lights, the school district does not have to follow our code anyway.
No, that's true. We have no control over it.
To a certain extent, yes, yeah. There's aspects that fall under different regulations.
Since this is something that applicants can apply to use optionally as they consider their signage dreams, I again wonder if we should just have it triggered by size and skip the street name. Because it's very hard to guess where someone might be coming up with a new campus, one master sign plan. I'm thinking of the Littleton Cemetery. That's parcel is going to be redeveloped at some point. You know, there's lots of places we may not anticipate, and they may wish to avail themselves of this. I don't know. How do people feel about that?
Guess I push back on that, because really the big opportunity is Littleton Boulevard, and we have sort of that goal of planning study that's, you know, coming soon, that will give us an opportunity to really consider what is the appropriate signage for that particular context. And other than that, I'm not seeing a lot of opportunities, you know. And by the time the cemetery is ripe for redevelopment, I think we'll
Big signs on the cemetery.
be on the third version of the ULUC.
All right.
proceeding at the pace of
There's
code
nothing that
adoption
stops
we
us
did
from adding
previously.
That is true. There's nothing in the future that stops you from adding, from doing a text amendment that would add a new roadway. That's very true.
But I think that was a good point about ACC being separated by a separate little strip of right-of-way. So is it technically on Santa Fe? Portions of
Sunset
it-
Drive.
I mean, I was counting it as part
Yeah.
of fronting on Santa Fe.
It's more of a frontage road.
No, do we have any say in community college signage? I mean, I
That's a
know we
good
don't with
question. I
public
mean,
schools, Colorado doesn't allow us to
They
dictate
have to,
terms to them.
they have to reach out to the planning department of wherever they're at and do their best to work within the confines, but they have their own regulations of downright and left.
So they're exempt anyway, they can do what they want.
Or maybe this would give them an opportunity to do a little more than they could otherwise.
yeah, oftentimes, schools and universities, et cetera, want to work with cities and be good, good partners there. And sometimes the restrictions don't work out, and other times they're more than happy to comply.
That just reminded me of another electronic sign, like community centers, recreation centers, schools, but that doesn't really apply, but here's the building that's happening today, tomorrow, next week. That's another potential use for that electronic sign. Not to throw a wrench in the works after we were all like, yeah, it's just gas.
Yeah, I see that at ACC and I see that at Hudson Gardens and I still hate it because like neither one of those roads am I going
Schools, well, you're
at a speed where that information is of any use or that you're gonna get more than one message across to any particular person going by. It's just distracting and it's like,
Well, I'm not so much saying like it needs to be consistently rotating, I'm saying Hudson Gardens is having Christmas lights.
right,
That's Christmas lights, and then they don't have to then pull out a sign that says, okay, we're doing Easter egg hunt. And then pull out, or, this concert is this week or stuff like that.
yeah,
It's-
but the thing is that they do scroll through them,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, you're like, oh, beekeeping classes.
Yeah.
And you don't see the thing about, plant sale or concert, it's kind of like if you want, it's there, but it's not particularly value added in my
I
experience.
just think from a safety
So,
point of view, I think
and-
we should not be allowing rotating projected light signs on roadways. I don't even like, Little Raven has one now in front of it. We can't constrain schools from doing it, but they're very
Yeah.
distracting. If I lived across from that and it runs all night, lighting up the neighborhood, it's so stupid. It's just like, the schools
agree.
use them all the time, and we're not gonna be able to constrain that, but I really do think we should be not allowing them in general on these kind of corridor roadways especially, that's just asking for distraction.
There's something about with a QR code that your car reads and flashes it up on your.
Yeah, how
screen.
about that? Or just,
Who knows what's in the future?
That's in the future.
car recognizes the Wi-Fi, geolocates and just brings up signage in your Tesla screen. Just what we need. Focus on ads in the driving compartment. But that's what it's like, that's a version of it, it's over there. Yeah, well, right, it'll be in the backseat of your Waymo taxi, will be triggered by the proximity of these buildings. Oh, the future's gonna be so good. But we hopefully will not be having bright signs on every road flashing in people's faces.
And that's actually, I was wondering, because we've talked a lot about electronic message centers, and in the baseline sign code, is it just gas station copy, or are electronic message centers permissible under our kind of standard sign code?
Yeah, so there's changeable copy that is allowed in certain locations within our existing sign code. And then there's been a little bit of an internal debate as to whether that means electronic or, the old Burger King sign that you go out there and you stick the letters in, right? So, the code's not exceedingly clear on whether that's electronic or not. Completely honest there.
Might be an opportunity to look at
To touch that up.
section and.
Was a note that somebody sent me just the other day.
We do expressly prohibit animated and moving signs. So that's kind of how we've been trying to make some of these determinations. We don't have anything that says, 5-second, 10-second hold on a sign, but it is, no animated light, no flashing, blinking, scintillating, fluctuating, rotating, swinging, moving. So we've been,
Use a lot of adjectives.
yeah, there's a lot of description there, so that's how staff has been making kind of their determinations is we do have some provisions for EMS that defers back to the building code, so we've been seeing this as like, it is those signs that are exceedingly distracting, so, Grease Monkey, I think for a little while had like fireworks or something going off and our code compliance got out there. They had some sort of problem with their sign, I can't remember what it was. And we determined that, if they have, I think oil change like Ladies Tuesdays or something. Like if you wanna display, you have your discounted days, it's fine, it just can't be in that fast moving fashion. And that it does have to, have some sort of, at least illusion of permanency.
So no scrolling letters, no animations, no, yeah. Thank you for that clarification. Any additional sign discussion? I really appreciate your comments about the sort of the visual aspect of it, and as these come back in a more refined form, would love to see sort of a layout of, maybe not Woodlawn Center, but somewhere showing, existing signage with, individual signs per parcel on the frontage, and then what it might look like if it were a little more consolidated under this proposal, to help us visualize.
Yeah, something to give you a sense of scale of that linear feet to square footage. I think is gonna be informative.
That sounds great. I can work on that. I'll be honest, I'm not the best visual graphics designer, but I can work on that. I was a little hesitant to work on it before this just because if I got a big swinging change, then I put a lot of energy into creating it. So, but I can work on that for the public hearing.
Yeah, hopefully there's a couple submittals that have scale drawings on them, for past projects that you can just crib and throw on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking of a few and I pulled a couple and then some of the other ones that I really wanted were from older signs or older plan sets, and they're categorized totally differently in our system, so it's taking me a while to pull those. And I was like, this is taking quite a while, but yes, I think we can find some case studies.
With an existing multi-tenant sign in the city, versus, what one might look like if the pylon were allowed. Any more sign feedback? Stuff is plating.
Yes, so I know we discussed these two items at the March 11th, let me just catch up to where we're at. So we did talk about, we'll be talking about plating and notice of mailing. We discussed these at the March 11th study session with the thought that we might be moving forward with these a little more quickly, but decided to pull these from the legislative updates that we'll be bringing you all in May. So we figured since we had some more breathing room, we just kind of bring this back to just finalize some thoughts from you all. So for plating, we do have some kind of opportunities to provide more clarity in the code, as well as some opportunities to streamline the process. We're not looking to really change any standards as it relates to lot sizes or anything like that, but really just ways to lessen the load for staff as well as applicants. And so the first is for, as we're thinking about streamlining the process, it's to reevaluate the city's role in condo plotting. We don't see many of these. Condos are not people's preferred, but we do get some applications from time to time, and our code requires that condo plats go through our process. However, most of the not even most of the time, every time we have already reviewed the building. With condo plating, when you're just subdividing the building itself, but you're not making any improvements to the land, there's nothing for us to really look at. And so we're currently proposing that we just strike condo plating from our code and just direct the applicants to the county for filing. And before I move forward, I meant to preface this, I don't have any questions for discussion. Please feel free to jump in if there are any thoughts or questions here, and we can just kind of tackle these as we move along.
Sure. Just one on
Yeah.
the condo plating, were there anything in sort of the condo plats that the city reviewed that is, were we getting any value out of it for?
Not typically, especially
residents?
because the state is so hyper-specific about what's required. Often I'm just really, we're leaning on Atasi for that help to kind of understand what it is that the applicant's proposing. But applicants are working with land use lawyers that are experienced in condo plating and understand the state regulations for them, certainly a lot better than planners do. And that again, if it's a proposal for a new build, we're looking at that new build through a site planning process, through the building permitting process.
Much more form.
Yeah, and where condo plating doesn't really seem to have that kind of like land use perspective that maybe a different type of subdivision might. So we're just looking to, again, help applicants out, get through the process a little bit more quickly without having to interact with staff on something that staff doesn't really have a whole lot of knowledge or really input on.
We get a lot of frustrations from applicants.
Yes.
About condo plating.
I'm all in favor of that. And condo plating is basically a change of ownership structure. It doesn't change the land, it doesn't change the surveying or anything. It's just an ownership rejiggering within the parcel. And I don't see us as having an interest in that in any great way, as long as it meets the state and county rules for whatever ownership structures they're going to employ, and management structures. But yeah, I think that's a good move. I think we should be able to get out of this business entirely.
Great.
Okay, and then just one other thing from experience from my day job is that a developer has used condo plating as a way to create a townhome project. Driving by this project, you would think that it was individual townhome lots, but they actually used a condo plat for that. And whether there might be some loopholes that the city wouldn't want to appear. And I will say that from the county's perspective, that was not a big deal because we were able to collect all the impact fees based on the site layout, the site design, and we were able to look at the aesthetics of the site and does the traffic work. So the fact that they used that method to create the ownership scheme within those townhomes ultimately didn't matter, but just suggestion to beware of
Yeah, that
unintended
was-
loopholes.
That was something we kind of really thought through and spoke with some of the surrounding municipalities about as well. And again, we feel that for the townhome itself, we would certainly see, we would have an idea of when it comes in for a site plan of what their intent is for it, because if they were looking to do individual plats, they would have to comply with those. But if they decided to take on, what is more of a burden for condo plating, we would certainly want to see at least, some sort of sketch outline for an HOA, party wall agreement, however they decided to move forward with that.
Your main differences there, you would still have to abide by setbacks, et cetera, where you might be able to make minor modifications would be to the width of the individual townhome in the building, right? Like our standard might be X, you might be able to have a little skinnier standard. That'd be the main, I think, place where you would be able to make some modifications based on condo. Past that, the density, setbacks, more of the bulk standards would still have to be complied with.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this before I move on? All right. Then the next one, and we discussed this at council, and I think there was some favor for that, but just want to kind of recap that and get your guys' thoughts, is to reevaluate our preliminary plat criteria. Where we have, right-of-way dedication, all right-of-way dedications are going to planning commission for acceptance. And really just removing that one criteria from preliminary plats and moving it to an administrative criteria. So the 2410 West Ridge Road is probably the best example we have of this, where it was 4 lots that were being created, and everything else about the development triggered an administrative review. But the right-of-way dedication per the TMP required them to go through a public hearing process, so we think it's really duplicative on staff as well as the applicant, where the city's already said, we would like to have this right of way, and in fact, you can't do this development without giving it to us. We're then creating a new process for the applicant. They're bearing the costs of that, and it is a little bit more time intensive for us as well as you all to look at this and say, okay, yeah, we wanted this part of Ridge Road, we'll still take it in.
Well, that's the only opportunity for public hearing, right, is if it comes to us for right-of-way dedication. So I guess that'd be the only downside of eliminating this, is that there's no opportunity for public hearing.
Only if it met the criteria for administrative approval, which is 4 lots or less, and there's a few other standards there, but yes. The larger developments that were over 4 lots, it would still come before.
Was Little Raven Elementary one where it came here because of the right of?
Where we were asking for the right of way, yes. And so there are these examples, right, where we've gone through the planning process with these city documents or city plans, so the TMP is kind of the one that we lean on the most, and where it calls out where that dedication is or where the right of way widths are required. And in order to get that, we need the property and that dedication through it. So it also holds us up from meeting our goals, I think, a little bit more quickly.
I'm in favor of this. I mean, you're asking for something that's already going to get in an administrative process internally anyway, and if there's a little bit of right of way that's included in that, it could be done administratively. That seems reasonable.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, the Ridge Road one that we looked at, it was kind of, it's almost, it almost was a little, I don't know, confusing maybe isn't the right word, but, just to have this whole plat, and then it was like the basis for it was this, that was, really, because it was in an area where, all the other houses, like, it was the same size lot, same size, it's just an empty lot converted to, 4 houses that were, on, similar lot sizes, similar density, that was just, it was, and I agree, I think it was a lot of, puts a lot of extra steps in where, where they just weren't really required, again, for larger any kind of larger development, or, anomalies within, sort of what's being requested and what's, what exists, then it definitely makes sense to have that, process, go all the way through, but it really did feel a little bit wasteful for that little strip.
And that's, we sometimes struggle with, when that is the criteria, how do we present that in a way that really kind of makes sense and really makes it clear this is what we're looking at, because the rest of this is actually an administrative review.
I think the other thing that came out of that, and I don't know if this is something, because we're talking about non-legislative updates to the ULUC, was there had to be some kind of funny divisions in that lot because of the street contact requirement. And I don't know if there was anything that was looked at as far as can we avoid these funny little or can we avoid developers having to go through these funny little lot splits and right of ways and egress so that they can all contact the street.
Off the private road or something like that. That was the issue, was the private drive,
Right, yeah, they all had to touch the street, so there was, yeah, they wound up with some kind of funny lot split, so. I don't know if that's something you guys had a chance to look at all, but.
We haven't contemplated it for this one, but it is,
Okay.
that's something we can certainly kind of go back and take a look at to see if we can, again, we're hoping to create more clarity in the code, so
Yeah.
that it's clear for staff as well as applicants what it is that we're asking of them. And sometimes we kind of end up in these roundabout interpretative conversations.
Yeah, it just, I remember, you know, when we were going through that, it just seemed like it would maybe make things simpler for, you know, for builders and, you know, these kind of small scale developers and give better lot layouts, more efficient options if they don't all have to have this little I'm touching the street requirement, so.
Major concerns with administrative reviews, being able to dedicate right?
I think it's fine.
This is the last one on plotting, and this kind of came to staff's attention. I don't know if you all remember last November, we had 2 preliminary plats. I believe you guys reviewed them the same night, where we were conditionally approving these plats because were consolidating plats that had existing development on it. That existing development then created a non-conforming plat. So we're trying to, I'm not sure that we fully achieve it here, but create more concise language to try to get around some of those conditional approvals, and ensure that they are, you know, that this criteria is also anticipating future development, which is what we're most likely to see when we do have these lot consolidations. And so I did include the language here, where, you know, in decision criteria 2, it states that any new lots created and subsequent development of the site shall conform to the zoning requirements for the district in which it is located in. We took out some language that I think is a little repetitive. We're always looking at zoning requirements, and that language there just kind of lists what requirements of zoning we're looking at. And then we kind of doubled down on that for decision criteria number 3, that, you know, any new lots and subsequent development conforms to the design standards improvements in LEDs, which will be forthcoming. I think I saw
I have
them.
the final, it's close. I have an email.
When do we get it for review? When do we get it
So-
for review?
So one of the examples I believe that Andrea is referencing is the Lumen site, right? You as planning commission see a preliminary plat, you don't see the final plat, right? Because at the preliminary plat, the decision is made that this is close enough, finish it up with the other minute details and get recorded. Oftentimes what we see in a redevelopment site is there's a lot of things still pending. And if you're at that preliminary plat location, we wouldn't final it out with the final plat process until we had, site plans, et cetera, like pretty much ready to go. But you see it early enough where, some of those finer details are still being worked out, right? Like who's going on the side, et cetera. Well, in the case of the Lumen, it was cutting through a building. And that was the challenge that we had is, it's like, okay, we're, asking the planning commission now to make non-conforming lots, but we're not gonna finish it without the site plan being done, et cetera, that will make it conforming. So that was kind of the chicken and the egg thing that we were dealing with, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this, so we aren't coming to you and saying, hey, you need to conditionally approve this because it's not gonna comply right now, but it will in the future. So it's trying to take that into consideration on redevelopment sites. That's really the goal.
One of the other things is that with, and it was probably because of me, I've always been used to conditional approvals whenever it comes to our planning commissions in my just past experience. But one of the other things that, when we were going back and forth with applicants' attorneys is that it does also ding their financing and what their perspectives are looking at in terms of a conditional approval, meaning, are they gonna meet X, Y, and Z that, you know, is sometimes dependent on staff schedules, sometimes, that sort of thing, if they're gonna be able to meet it in time for their financing to go through, and I think I've heard that maybe 2 or 3 times now, and so, and language very much matters, so, you know, we want to try and stay away from some of the conditional approvals, if we can. Obviously, there are many circumstances where we would want it and continue to move forward, with making sure that we do have conditional approvals, but in some of these instances, it doesn't seem necessary.
So this were the language that was in place at the time of the Lumen plat, the staff report probably would have referenced that, you know, this is, you know, setting things up for future development, and there wouldn't have been a condition necessarily in the approval.
Yeah, it basically indicate that, you know, that at time of final plat, we'll have the rest of the documents ready to go. More, I mean, sorry, I'm putting that in layman's terms, yeah, but that's more the language we would work towards.
You'll see the preliminary plat and the new lots created and subsequent development will be laid out, and we will be looking at them together and approving it. Not based on conditionality, and this is what the expected plan of both the plat and the future development look like. This is what we expect it at the final to be like, and we'll fold it all up at the final platting, yeah. I understand, makes sense.
Thank you all. So then the next will be notice of mailing. We discussed this at the March 11th as well. This is really just to provide some flexibility. Our code is hyper specific about who does what and actually contradictory. We'll get into that in just a second. We aren't looking to change any of the process or requirements. So who gets notice, when they get notice, and those addresses that get noticed, none of that changes. In this proposal, it again is just allowing for some flexibility in the code. Postage is getting really expensive for us, so if applicants are able to do it more, more affordably, and also be able to kind of meet some of their timelines a little bit more quickly, what we are hoping to be able to do. So again, we're just looking to eliminate some of those conflicting code languages, as well as being able to provide that flexibility. Staff, regardless of who is doing it, staff is still involved every step of the way. And we would develop a process internally for how to address that. And this is one of those ones where I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of clear on what it was that we were doing and what we're proposing. So cleaning up that conflicting language in C3 on the left, just removing that city staff is responsible for creating and mailing the notice, but leaving everything else on there intact. And then in neighborhood meetings, it refers to the applicant shall provide. But then we refer back to where city staff has to provide all mailings. So we remove that. And again, to keep the flexibility, sometimes we have smaller applicants that don't have the know-how, so we don't want to force anybody into a process that might create just more hardship than necessary. So just stating that written notice shall be provided as set forth, and then clarifying that any costs that are incurred will be reimbursed by the applicant. That is our current process right now. And so we just want to make sure that that is very clear, even though we might be kind of loosening up on who's doing it. We want to be sure that everyone knows that should we be providing that we expect reimbursement.
2 thumbs up from me on that.
I agree, just by taking some language out, you're able to be more direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's kind of like this. We're trying to avoid that.
Seems like a clarification.
The planning defines the format of the notification.
We would still provide the template as well as the addresses that would need to receive notification. And then we would expect, similar to what we do with public hearing signs, where, you know, we need to see that a sign has gone up at least 10 days in advance of the hearing. We would need to have that certified mail 10 days in advance of a neighborhood meeting or any public hearing.
Or some form of mail
Yeah.
with some form of proof of being sent.
Something that guarantees us that they are indeed going out, because we do know that that's been a challenge here in the past prior to this code update as well as in other jurisdictions. Great. Well, then that's all we have for code updates for you guys. We did detail some next steps. Would you like to?
Yeah,
give those
the only update is, you know, we're hoping to look at the May 12th meeting for Plan Commission. First and second reading for council might end up being June into July rather than May to June. So that's the only other update on this with the additional conversations I've had in the very recent past.
And then for plating and notice of mailings, we'll be looking at the July 14th Planning Commission hearing for request for recommendation, and then looking at August and September for first and second readings at City Council for final adoption.
Why would you combine the two? Do they need to be separate?
Yeah, I was trying to work on master sign plan to be a little bit earlier on in the process. So I heard from some stakeholders that are interested in, you know, in working on some signage. So that was the intent. But I also want it to be done right. So I don't want this date to necessarily be set in stone. That's our targeted date. But you know, got some good feedback and plan on working to get the red lines out here in the near future. So if we end up needing more time, you know, we can work on that. And if it does pan out that we can hit the May 12th, which it has been noticed for, that'd be our preference.
Seems like the plating and the notice of mailings is so straightforward.
Yeah,
And it's just like,
Just bring it to the done.
To be fair, some of it is that because our timeline for the legislative updates were so narrow, it required everything going just right, and not everything went just right. So May 12th is a pretty busy night for you all. And so this just gave us a little bit more breathing room to be totally frank, in order to kind of get this done, as well as to be able to focus on the legislative updates and getting that out, and to free up the 12th just a little bit more for some conversation, because we do, you know, the language is really straightforward and it is mostly done, but we did want to just be able to kind of be able to focus that night on those higher priority items that you guys will be seeing.
You have a number of public hearings, or I guess one, but it'll be over the legislative items. And so I've heard some interest in those items.
Yeah, we're setting up the 12th to be quite a doozy for you all, so. That's all we have. All right, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. And any other announcements?
Just that we anticipate a meeting on May 12th coming up.
Yeah.
Meeting on May 12th.
Yeah, I guess I can't think of anything. I take that back. We talked about the ULI TAP grants at a previous study session. So just so you know, we do have, you know, our individuals from Plan Commission that will attend. But if I'm not mistaken, and we can give more information to you, the Thursday night, so it's a 2-day deal. It's the full ULI item. It's Wednesday and Thursday, but the Thursday night will be a public kind of open house to hear the feedback from that process. I believe that's going to be at 5 p.m. So that is May. I'll get you. I think it's 22nd. So I think
22nd, yeah.
Yeah, I think the interaction from the two,
No, May 21st, 22nd. It's on
Yeah,
the
the-
evening of the 22nd.
yeah, the interaction from the two plan commissioners, I believe, is on the 21st, but then once everything kind of is culminated at the end of that event, it'll be on that Thursday, the 22nd. Hopefully I'll be able to share more details at the 12th, but wanted to make sure everybody was aware.
Thank you for that update, and I think with that, at 8:05 PM, the study session is concluded.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.